Hi, friends. Welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View podcast. And we have with us a very illustrious guest, the Foreign and Security Minister of East Turkistan Government in Exile, Mr. Salih Hudayar. Mr. Hudayar, thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule and being with us.
Thank you for having me again.
And today we are going to address the disinformation campaign, which is targeting the East Turkistan's independence movement. And there has been certain psyops, uh, and about that we are going to talk. And Mr. Hudayar would share his perspective and let us know how this disinformation campaign is being run, why it is being done, who are and how they plan to basically counter this campaign. Mr. Hudayar, my first query is that how would you describe the core goals and identity of East Turkestan's independence movement, and how do they differ actually from the narratives pushed by Islamists and extremist groups?
Yes, so this is actually very simple. Our core goal, as our ideology or our policy, is that we have one goal, one enemy. And our one goal is to restore East Turkestan's national independence. And our one enemy is the Chinese state. We are not calling, unlike the Islamists and extremists, we're not calling for a caliphate or an Islamic state. Our struggle is a national liberation struggle. It's not a religious struggle. We represent all of East Turkestan's people, Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and other Turkic peoples. And our sole goal, again, is about restoring our national independence and ensuring the survival of our people, not about, establishing Islamic caliphate or other things that Islamists and other extremists propagate. And of course, this is part of China's tactics. Since the root of this started really after the fall of the Soviet Union and the independence of the Central Asian republics. So at that time, after the end of the Cold War, you had a rise in Islamic fundamentalism across, much of the world. And China sees this as an opportunity to paint our movement, to falsely paint it as Islamic fundamentalism in order to deter potential support for our independence movement and to demonize us. So in Central Asia, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, where we have a very large diaspora community and we share cultural, ethnic, and historical ties to these nations, in the early 90s, they were very sympathetic to our cause. Our bases of operations were in those countries for our independence movement. Then post 1996, after China, the CCP Politburo, they held a top secret meeting, their standing committee, top 7 members of the CCP, on controlling, East Turkestan, on preventing East Turkestan's independence. And so they issued a 10-point series of directives on this issue, and one of the directives, point 8, clearly called for engaging in dialogue with those, Central Asian states and Turkey, winning over those countries, co-opting them to suppress our independence movement, but at the same time engaging in dialogue, engaging in infiltration and co-optation of our diaspora organizations, winning them over to China's side, using all types of propaganda to ensure and prevent the internationalization of the East Turkestan problem. And so that's when China began to fabricate through, its all-weather ally Pakistan and other partners, these small groups of false flag Islamists, and they use them to not attack China, but to attack the interests and security of Central Asian states. So even Central Asian governments at that time, they said, we had really no problems. We were okay with the Uyghurs, advocating for independence. We were, indifferent to that. But the moment that they started advocating for, an Islamic caliphate in all of Central Asia, that became our threat to us. And that's why we are cooperating with China to crush, and this is the whole creation of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, was based on this narrative. And China successfully, persuaded the Central Asian countries to crush our independence movement in Central Asia. Many of our leaders in Central Asia were assassinated, whereas the Islamists, they were allowed to flee off into Afghanistan, into other places. China's false flag Islamists, where China aligned them, through forces like Pakistan's intelligence service, to connected them to Al Qaeda and other groups, where then China began to propagate the narrative that we are fighting against Islamic fundamentalism, and essentially they, demonized our national independence movement as, Islamic fundamentalism or global jihadism, and their false flag Islamists and their propaganda helped, sustain this false narrative.
I just wanted to know, you recently tweeted that there was this psyops, psychological operation which was going on. So if you could elaborate a little bit more about that in terms of the evidence you have seen or collected, or your colleagues have collected or seen, and how this coordinated psychological operation is being conducted to distort this East Turkestan issue. And also, is China using Pakistan also, especially to propagate this, the Islamist tag on the East Turkestan independence movement?
Yes, as I just briefly told you about the history of the dynamics of this, this is especially increasing right now on social media platforms. You have troll accounts, essentially. That's what they are. Some appearing Turkish, some appearing, writing in English, and so forth, to try to tie, calling for an Islamic emirate or an Islamic caliphate in Central Asia, and stating that, the East Turkistan cause is about, Islamic liberation, all these type of things. And of course, this helps China's narrative, because again, why is China? What is the basis in which China is committing genocide, the ongoing genocide against our population? They're saying that, we're fighting to prevent, Islamists from infiltrating and creating an Islamic caliphate. This is a threat to not just China, but to the whole of the international community, to regional security, etc. This is the narrative that China uses. And of course, if it didn't have, these false flag Islamists and these PSYOP campaigns, backed by its intelligence partners. And when I mean their intelligence and security partners, we're talking about Pakistan, Turkey, among others, even Russia. And as far as Pakistan, the Islamists, China created the Islamists in Pakistan. This is the all-weather ally that I trusted to undertake this role. So during the heat of the so-called Strike Hard campaign against so-called national separatism and illegal religious activities, which China launched in 1996, continued in 1997, China suddenly let a handful of Islamists flee off into Pakistan. When it's arresting thousands of our people as nationalists, it's letting its controlled operatives to go off into Pakistan, where they are, no surprise, greeted by the Jamaat-e-Islam of Pakistan. And they are indoctrinated by the Jamaat-e-Islam of Pakistan. Then they are sent off, that's where they create their so-called Islamic Party. And then they're sent off into Afghanistan, and they declare jihad not against China, but against all the so-called global infidels, including the so-called infidel governments of Central Asia. And those governments of Central Asia, notably Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, they were, our host nations at that time. That was where our national independence movement was being, based out of. So these Islamist groups then in 98, 99, launched attacks into those countries. One is known as the Batken conflict. And of course, no surprise, Russia, which is also a key role in this because it benefited Russia as well, they take these Islamists back and drop them back off into Afghanistan. Then come around 3 weeks before the creation of the SCO in the summer of 2001, the IMU, the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, which many experts believe is a Russian intelligence proxy used to pressure Uzbekistan and the Central Asian republics, merged with the handful of Islamists that the Chinese intelligence had sent out into Pakistan, and rebranded themselves as the Islamic Party of Turkestan, or the Turkestan Islamic Party, and clearly stated that their goal is not just about liberating East Turkistan and establishing some Islamic state there, but it's about liberating all of Central Asia and establishing a Islamic caliphate in the whole of Central Asia. And that's precisely what China needed to rally these Central Asian governments against our cause. And with that, China was able to neutralize our cause, along with the assassinations that it carried out against our actual legitimate national leaders. And China sustained this propaganda throughout the decade, especially post 9/11, and then with the Syrian conflict, China aligned with Turkish intelligence to send, recruit Central Asians along with, thousands of Uyghurs, and sending them off into Syria, where some of them joined up Al Qaeda group, linked groups like the TIP. Others joined up, small numbers were sold to groups like ISIS, and they made propaganda that they would, vow to liberate, to come to China and establish an Islamic State. And China pointed to that as a fundamental excuse or basis of why they needed to mass intern millions of our people into these concentration camps and prisons. So this Islamist narrative was created, by China and its intelligence partners, security and intelligence partners, to essentially demonize and undermine our independence movement, and to prevent, any real international support for us.
How is the Western world looking at it, especially US? Are they buying out, this propaganda which is being run by China and its intelligence partners, as you mentioned? Or is there understanding that, okay, these are basically the psyops, and these are there to kind of demonize the East Turkistan government in exile, or the independence movement for East Turkistan? So what's the international scenario? The kind of feedback which you are getting.
I mean, the United States and the Western world, they were well aware of these games even from the beginning. And initially, when China, after 9/11, China pressured these countries to, give them a list of 30, 40 different organizations and said, we want you to recognize all of them as terrorist organizations. And many of these countries refused. It was only as part of you know, the Bush administration wanted to get, didn't want China to veto its entrance or invasion of Iraq, so they acquiesced, and China labeled, created and the so-called acronym ETIM, or the East Turkistan Islamic Movement, and said that we want you to list this as a terrorist organization, and the U.S. did, but it refused to recognize other East Turkistani groups as terrorist organizations. But China picked this acronym purposely because prior to November 2001, 2 months after 9/11, there was no mention of any group, whether by China or any other sources, as the ETIM, or the East Turkistan Islamic movement. Of course, China fabricated this to demonize our entire independence movement as part of some global jihadist Islamic movement, because, again, the East Turkestan independence movement, it also falls under the same acronym, ETIM. You replace Islam with independence, it's the same thing if you use the acronyms. So China played this strategically. However, the US, because no such group existed as ETIM, the US delisted the ETIM from its terrorist list, because there was no such group, because the Chinese government was trying to claim that our government in exile and our national movement was part of the so-called ETIM narrative that it fabricated. Um, Governments are waking up. I think Western governments and intelligence services, they are very well aware of the games that China is playing. Um, but in terms of the broader international community, of course, they're not as well aware of the issue. And while Western governments are aware, they haven't yet taken any countermeasures against this, other than stating that the United States views that while there are some groups that are Islamist, we don't believe the East Turkestan, the Uyghur people and their movement is an Islamist or whatever movement.
My last question is that, uh, what's your suggestion that how can allies, media outlets, and observers they can help distinguish between the genuine advocacy for East Turkestan's rights and malicious propaganda aimed at delegitimizing it? So how do
Well,
so if you could speak about this.
yeah, well, this is very easy. Talk to the people who aren't wearing masks. If they're wearing masks, then obviously they're hiding something. They're not. They're afraid to reveal their true faces. Talk to the people that aren't wearing masks. Talk to the organizations that aren't, wearing masks and claiming to represent, the East Turkestan people. Talk to those who, uh, are actually about, East Turkestan's independence, not those who are fighting off in some other conflict in other parts of the world, wanting to create an Islamic State here or there. Our sole goal, our sole struggle is about national liberation, not about Islamic jihadism or fundamentalism or creating an Islamic caliphate or anything. We have only one goal, and that's independence, and we have only one enemy. We don't, our movement, our independence movement doesn't have any um, other goals or other enemies. We, in fact, want the international community, regardless of what country or what nation or religious that background they may have, to support our just struggle to restore our independence. We're not out here trying to create enemies. So those who are purposely trying to create enemies and to demonize our people, no doubt it's the Chinese and their intelligence and security partners, PSYOPs, and no doubt none of the activities that these PSYOP and false flag groups have done, none of it has harmed China. On the contrary, it has only benefited China's narrative to paint us as so-called terrorists or extremists or Islamists or what so have you, and help China to legitimize the ongoing genocide of our people.
Thank you, Mr. Hudayar, for joining us and bringing in this perspective. And to our viewers, we'll also be sharing the link of the East Turkistan's Government in Exile's official website. So, as we discussed, if you want to really know who is running the disinformation campaign and how to differentiate between this legitimate independence movement and the malicious campaign which is being run by the Chinese intelligence agencies and its partners. So we'll be sharing the link of the website in the YouTube description box. And thank you for watching. And we'll soon be back with another episode. Thank you, Mr. Udaya, for taking out time from your busy schedule once again. And we'll keep on tracking the East Turkestan independence movement. And we'll keep on talking to the representatives of this government in exile to bring you the latest update. Thank you for watching.